mic's on. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we ready? Should we go? Is that our cue to go?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Is that our, we're good to go? Okay. Hello, everyone. How are you guys? Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to see so many young scholars here. My name's Ayana Orr. I am the Director of Community Affairs at Ariel Investments. And Ariel Investments has been a partner of Operation Push for a very, very long time. So excited to be here, excited to see you all here, excited to see so many young scholars. I don't think you guys know how lucky you are that you have someone in your life that cares so much about you to make sure you're here on this day to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King. And part of that legacy is economic empowerment and economic development, and really making sure that people of color, Black people especially, are not locked out of the economy. Because we are really trying to approach this wealth gap and close this wealth gap for the betterment of the society as a whole and our community in particular. To that end, Ariel Investments really focuses on financial education. We think the place to start is the young children. Start as soon as you can, especially with saving money and investing money. To that end, I have my colleague here, Miles Gage. I am so proud to be standing here with Miles. Miles was a student at Ariel Community Academy, a school that Ariel Investments started in 1996. He went to the lab school. He is just living the dream. He graduated from college, went to work in financial services, and now has his own financial education company. So it's wonderful, and I'm so proud to be standing here to see the vision that John had come full circle. To that end, I will turn it over to Miles.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. And more importantly, thank you all for being here on a Saturday, because I know when I was your age, it would be really hard to drag me out the house when I could be watching cartoons, playing video games, all sorts of other things. But the fact that you're here already means that you kind of care about like your future, and obviously you care about like what your parents think are important. But I have a presentation prepared for you all today talking about investing. But I think before that, I'll tell you a little bit about my background, because I grew up basically just like you all, down the street in the Bronzeville area. And as Ayana said, I went to a school called Ariel on 46 in Greenwood, so literally right down the street. And basically what was different from our school than a lot of other schools is we started learning about finance at an early age. And you all have these books about priceless money facts. So a lot of those topics and concepts are in the books, are like things that we were actually learning in every day at school, right? And so before we go any further, so who in this room like wants to make a lot of money one day, right? Okay, so that's everyone. So like how do you do that? By working, right? Yeah. What are the other ways that you can like make a lot of money? Do you have an idea? Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the biggest way that you can make money, like you said, is like by investing. Like that's the key way to make other money. Did you have an answer? No? Okay. Do you have one up here? You have one? What's another way? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so exactly. So the two ways that you basically make money are either by investing or like owning your own business that sells a product or service because it brings in revenue and income for yourself. And like those are the key concepts. And like that's, if the fact that you already know that right now, you can already start applying that and you can get ahead. And so that was literally my school. And so we were starting to think about that stuff like first, second, third, fourth grade. So I was very much like you all, and I wanted to make money one day. And so there was this thing that was introduced to us called the stock market. And has anyone ever heard of the stock market before? Just raise your hands. Okay, so basically, what a stock is, it represents ownership in a business, right? So you say you can invest in a business. So the reason that you want to invest in the business is basically you're providing them money, and they're putting that money to work to make profits. And so you, as the investor, you're not physically working for that organization, you just provided the capital. So if they're profitable, they distribute back the profits back to the owners. So the way you can think of a company, right, is like a pizza. So if you have a slice of a company, that means you have a part ownership of that business. And the more slices that you have of a pizza means the larger your ownership percentage is. So that means that you're more entitled to those companies' profits because you're a bigger owner. But you're not doing anything, right? You just provided the money. So yeah, that is one of the ways that you make a lot of money is through investing in that, create something called passive income. The other thing that you mentioned was like having your own business and selling things. So you can, because you're selling things, you're not necessarily investing, but that's your own business, you own 100% of it. So every time you sell a product, let's say it's a t-shirt. So it costs you $1 to buy the t-shirt and you sell it for $2. So every t-shirt you sell, you make $1. So there's like unlimited amount of money that you can make doing that. But in addition to that, you could start hiring other people to do that. You can pay them salaries, and then you just start collecting the profits. That's the similar concept of investing, but nonetheless, you are a part owner of a business. So that's like one of the key things about building wealth is you do have to have ownership in something. So the whole reason that you all are in school and trying to get good grades is to ultimately go to college and work. And so you work to make money. But you can only work so many hours throughout the day, right? So some people think like, oh, I'm gonna get rich with this high-paying job, but if you don't love what you do, you're gonna burn out. So I always say you should do what you love, and by that, you're gonna work hard at it and ultimately get paid. But nonetheless, one key thing that you all should understand, it's not about how much money you make, but it's about what you do with your money. So it's about how much you save and then ultimately invest. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And so going back to the story, so I started learning all of this, and so that investment concept was really cool to me. So in 6th grade, I started managing my own portfolio of stocks. So basically, I told you that buying a share of stock represents ownership in a business. Basically, anybody can buy shares of a company if it's publicly traded. Like, it's accessible. So learning that, I was like, wait, I could make money doing that? So when I was 12, I think the first share of stock that I bought was like Nike for $80, and the second share was Apple for $100. And oftentimes there's this misconception that you need to be very wealthy to start investing, but like that's just not the case. You just need to like understand the sheer concept of it. But what often happens is people don't understand the mechanics of the stock market, and sometimes they end up treating it like the casino. So the idea of investing is that you're buying a share of a company at one price, and then you're selling it at a higher price. Or you're buying a share of a company with hopes that they're profitable and they distribute profits back to the owners, called dividend payments. So that creates income, that creates wealth for you. But the inexperienced investor not necessarily thinking about that. Additionally, they don't necessarily understand that stock prices, they go up and down every day, right? And so the reason, and you all have probably seen this on TV, like Apple was up $100, or the S&P 500, or the Dow Jones. All of those are just these basic benchmarks that represent different companies. All that is just day-to-day movement and short-term outlook on the health of a business. You don't get rich overnight. That's just the whole thing. But if you've never invested and you bought a stock, let's say at $100 today, and then tomorrow you woke up and you saw it was $95, would you be a little upset? You looked a little upset, right? You felt like you lost $5. Yeah, that's fair. Right, that's common. And that's how most people react. But when you think about it in the longer term of like, hey, I'm investing in this business because I buy Nike shoes every other week. I buy Nike shoes, all my friends buy Nike shoes. So as long as they're profitable, in theory, the value of my stock, my ownership in that company is going to go up over time, which is the case. Day to day, yeah, there are different news headlines and articles that may impact the short term, like they might have a supply shortage so they're not able to sell shoes, or they might have a CEO that didn't understand the culture, but they make those changes and ultimately over time, things kind of go up. And so that's like kind of that historical aspect of investing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, and especially in communities of color. So we were learning about that in middle school, and then me, like I said, started investing, and I really aggressively took towards it. And the thing that you all may not understand is you have money now. I know you have birthdays, Christmas, chores, things like that where you're getting a little bit of money here and there. And so instead of like buying those shoes that you're gonna outwear or outgrow, or buying some clothes that are ultimately gonna go out of style, or an iPod that you might lose or break, that's what happened to me. Think about like, why don't I just buy a share of stock, and ultimately I want to hold this over time because I'm gonna continue to support that company. So it's like, if a share of Apple is $100, why wouldn't you buy that share of Apple? Because you know you're gonna go spend $120 on some AirPods the next month, and then you might also want a new iPad, and that's $400. You already gave that money to the company anyway. So it's like, it should be reflected in your ownership. And that's the key concept. And one thing that I'll just share with you, in a concept that's really good to think about investing, is you should want to invest in companies that you would want to hold for a long period of time. And also think about companies that are essentials to the economy. Because to challenge the concept of investing is a casino, right, and it's gambling, there are businesses that are essential to our day-to-day life. For example, we have these things called cars. They need gas. I believe like last summer, gas prices were extra high, right? But did we stop going to the pump to fuel our cars? No, we didn't. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Unfortunately, natural gas powers various aspects of society. And guess what? Those are for-profit organizations that benefit from that. So it's like, as long as that is the paradigm, people are gonna keep getting enriched. And it's typically not folks that look like us. But it's like, when do we start just understanding what's going on? And so now, to kind of tie things forward, I developed this organization called Rapunzel back in 2016, and essentially it started out as an app to teach people how to invest in the stock market. And basically what we do is we give users 10,000 fake dollars, and they're able to use that money to buy and sell stocks of real publicly traded companies. And so basically we get data streamed directly from NASDAQ. And so it allows us to have like all the real-time stock prices and whatnot. So it's a real-time thing, because what I recognize is if you can expose people, or if you can give students these tools at an early age, it's like they're gonna gravitate towards them. Yeah, you have a question? Yeah, so when you have the fake money, you're able to use that money to buy and sell stocks of real companies. So basically we have this partnership with one of the stock exchanges that gives us the data, so it allows us to track the real market. So it's a way for you to get comfortable with the movement of the stock market. And so every year we host an investment competition for middle and high school students. And you can compete for prizes based on your portfolio. But at the end of the day, the concept is really trying to help you think about the power of your dollar as a consumer, to not only be conscious, but to think about being a part owner of the business and understanding how valuable you are as an entity and what you can do as that unit, right? And the fact that you can use your dollars to affect change in various ways. Especially people often, they may boycott a company if something is not up to par, and yeah, that'll get them to recognize, but you know who has even more say than them is the board of directors. And the way you get on the board of directors is by your ownership or the number of stocks you have or the number of slices of pizza. So think about really being able to affect change in a way that can impact different groups of people. So that's just something that isn't really discussed in schools on a broader spectrum. That is the reason that we exist. But yeah, so do you guys have any other questions? I have a presentation, so I can definitely refer to some of those points that I just referred to. Yep. How do you make a company? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out. Yeah.
How did you make your company?
Basically, I did a lot of research, and first thing that I did was I looked at what is the problem. And the problem that we saw was that young people were getting exposed to the stock market in negative ways. And so you might be a little bit younger, but back in 2016, there was the emergence of a platform called Robinhood that allows you to buy stocks on your phone. So before that, you couldn't really buy stocks on your phone. It was a much more challenging process. So we recognized that a lot of people were gonna fall into this bad habit. So the first thing was addressing the problem, and then our solution was like, we have an education tool that essentially serves as the intermediary or the middle point before you actually invest with your real money. So this is a way to practice, this is a way to learn, and so that we basically wrote a paper or put a project together and put all these different numbers and showed all these different data points to ultimately convince people that they should give us money to build out said or address said problem. And once we were able to do that, and that's really hard, especially if you don't know people with money or don't have access to that. That is like really one of the biggest roadblocks for people for not getting businesses off the ground. So another thing that I would suggest for you all is just always trying to expand your network beyond maybe your comfort zone and being around people that don't necessarily look like you. Because you just never know who can help and where opportunities reside. So to that point, after we did that, we found a developer in Canada, and basically they built out a prototype for us. So they built out a prototype app, and so through that, we were able to like go get some users and do a program on the platform, show like that there was a proof of concept, and then get more people to basically support it. But it's not as straightforward as that. It's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of hurdles and challenges. But essentially, the biggest thing I would say is for any business is identify a problem and demonstrate why you are the best person to address and solve that problem. Yes. Next slide. We can go to 2 slides. Next. Next one. Okay. Yeah, so basically, as I mentioned, a share of stock represents ownership in a business. So now I'm going to quiz you. Why would you want to be an owner of a business? Okay, someone that's not you two. How about you in the grade? Why do you want to be an owner of a business? Yeah. Yeah. It's okay, any answer. Why would you want to be an owner of a business? Why would you want to own a business?
Because you want to help other people understand money.
That could be one reason you want to own a business, to help people understand money. All right.
So I think if you're a business owner, then you'd probably be able to like sort out all the money for everyone. So like one person gets $5 and the other person gets $5 and it gets
Yeah, you might have some labor issues paying them $5, but yeah, in theory, that works. I see you in the pink sweatshirt.
You probably want to be a business like owner so you can make money for yourself.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's like so you can make money for yourself. So basically, I'm gonna break down the stock market again. So where is the slide? Okay. So yeah, so like I said, a share of stock represents a portion of ownership. So the more shares you have, larger ownership position you have, the bigger boss you are in that organization in theory, or profit share you get. And basically how stocks work is they are listed on these things called stock exchanges. So they exist electronically now, but it's where you can go and buy and sell shares of your stock. They match buyers and sellers. Next slide. So has anyone ever heard of like the app StockX to sell shoes? Okay. Can you explain to me what StockX is, the app? Either of you? Yeah.
So it's like an app where you would go on there and kind of find like clothes or shoes that you want, and people would like normally buy them and resell them for like, so it's making a profit. If they buy it for 180, they'll normally sell it for like 200, 220.
Right. So I'll give you an example. So let's say there's a pair of Nike Jordan 1s that came out today, right? And they were box price, or in the store they were $150. But they sold out, and everyone here missed them because you're learning about finance. So if you wanted to buy those shoes, you could go on StockX, right? So do you think how much would you be paying for those shoes on StockX? Do you think it would still be $150?
They would go up for a higher price because of supply and demand.
Right,
So,
supply and demand. So basically that whole concept of supply and demand is how stock prices move too. So the more in demand a stock is, the higher the price is going to be, right? And on the flip side, the less demand the shoe is or the stock is, the lower it's going to be. So now back to that example, let's say that you wanted the shoe and they sold out, but then you heard there was a giant restock, at Foot Locker, Nike. Would you still go on StockX for those shoes?
no, I'd probably go get them from the shop because people would see that they'd still be a little bit higher, but if I went to the actual store, they'd be less.
Right. And so if you were the seller on StockX, what would you have to do in order to move that shoe, to sell it?
I'd have to lower the price.
Yeah, you have to lower the price below what it is at retail. And that same concept also applies to stocks too, and that's why stock prices go down, is that ultimately if you want to sell your shares, you may not be able to get the price that you paid for them, but the market will dictate another price. And so that can be a good or a bad thing. But the key thing is to understand that stock prices go up and down every day because demand for businesses change on a day-to-day basis on the short term. However, on the long term, those businesses can have real big impacts and can be beneficial. But the market and the stock market and people in general, they react to short-term headlines, and that's just the way things go. So if, and it's basically like an example would be like, so if there are, I know this is such a bad example, but because there are fires in Los Angeles, it's possible that there are entertainment companies that aren't doing well right now because people can't access their facilities, or let's say Paramount, like they can't, make shows or things like that. So on the short term, investors are like, well, Paramount's not making any money because like there are fires and I don't know when they're going to be profitable again. So people are very hyper reactive to that. So that stock is going to go down maybe for a week, a month, who knows? But eventually the fires will stop and they'll rebuild, and then the production will kick off. And then investors or people on the news, seeing the news will see that and like, oh, I want to buy Paramount stock. And like they have all these great movies and things like that. But that's like how the market acts, and that's how people respond. So that's why, like, as an investor and as young investors, you kind of have to be disciplined and not, reacting to all of these different headlines. So next slide. Yeah. So the benefits of being a shareholder is buying a stock at a low price and then selling it at a high price. And so the way stock prices rise is over time, they sell more units, they have more revenue, they have higher profits. The perceived value outside looking in is that this is more expensive, just like shoes. And on the other way that you make money is companies distribute profits back to their shareholders in these things called dividends. So that's a way to like make money too, passive income. Like you could do that. Like there's some companies that pay dividends every quarter, annually, or every half a year. So that's a really cool concept. And so an example that I have for you was when I was investing or beginning, it was in 2008. So that was during the last big recession. So people were really scared. Stock prices were down 40, 50%. People thought it was the end of the world because they had never seen anything like that. So as a 14-year-old eighth grader, I'm like, the reason a lot of people are freaking out is because their retirement savings and fund are tied in these different assets or these stocks per se. So for me, I'm like, oh, everything's just on sale. So I was able to buy a lot of companies discounted. So I think between middle and high school, I spent about like $4,000 or $5,000 on stocks. And that was like from chores, like working at the Chicago Park District, working in the office. It wasn't like I was making a lot of money, but I was being smart with how I was using my job. But that portfolio grew to about like $45,000 in 2019. And then I was able to use some of that money to like support myself while we were like getting Rapunzel off the ground. So that was just a side fact, but that is one of the reasons that you want to think about this for the long term, and you all can, because you all are young. You're either in elementary, middle, or high school. So the world's in a very interesting place, and things are changing, demands are changing, and companies, there are going to be companies that are making those things and profiting, and so should you. So next slide. Next. So we talked about supply and demand. Next slide. Okay, yeah. So the biggest things that influence the demand for investors, like I mentioned, there's a lot of short-term things that will do that. But ultimately, the key things that you should look for, especially when I'm talking about long-term investing, like despite what short-term headlines may be, is this business profitable? Or does it have a path to becoming profitable, right? So there are many businesses that have been around for decades, hundreds of years, that are extremely profitable, that consistently have shown that they make money because they provide like necessities and needs like that. So like examples you could think of are like a Home Depot, because people like always have to repaint and modify and build structures. Like these are companies that, like if you look at their stock prices over time, have done like well. Like Coca-Cola, you think about whenever you go to a restaurant, they either have Pepsi or Coca-Cola products. Every restaurant, think about that. And Coca-Cola owns so many different brands, so many different snacks that you consume on a day-to-day basis. And when you look at their stock price, especially stretched out over like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it just looks like that, right? So think about businesses that are profitable or have the ability to be profitable, because that in itself is going to be a good way to consider if investment is worthy or not. The other thing when you're thinking about investing in a company is market share. So what I mean by market share is like how popular or how much size of the space do they occupy. So when you think about like gym shoes, what's the first brand that comes to mind? Yeah, Nike. What's another one? You said what? I said sneakers. Pepsi makes sneakers? Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Okay, what did you just want to say? You said what? Adidas? Jordan?
Yeah, Jordan.
Guess who owns Jordan? Nike. All right, so literally exactly to that point, like when we think about the athletic sneaker market or shoe market, Nike predominantly dominates that space. And they own brands like Jordan and I think Puma, a couple other things. But like that itself, and when we're thinking about an investment, means that there's such a high barrier to entry, meaning that there can't be it'll be difficult for companies to truly be a threat. Obviously, you have like Adidas and other and New Balance that have challenged them in recent years, but nonetheless, it's not like you or I could make a shoe and convince the south side of Chicago to buy it. It would just be hard because a lot of people beyond this room have like that brand loyalty, and that's great because when they think about buying shoes, they go back to those 3 or 4 companies, and those other companies are still profitable too, right? Cue back to the slide. The other thing that you want to think about is growth. So is the business in an industry that's growing or shrinking? So I can give you an example of a space that's growing and it's not going anywhere, is like artificial intelligence. We're just really like at the birth of it, and there's so many other industries that have not been impacted by that but are going to be. So when you think about opportunities for yourself, you're going to want to think about those types of spaces. The other things that are growing or that are going to be needed in the years are, we have like what's called like aging infrastructure. So like our bridges, our roads, plumbing, pipes, all of that stuff is like old and it's gonna have to be replaced, right? And it's gonna be in you all's in our lifetime. So those companies that create those metals and have those products or oversee those people, that's where you're gonna benefit. It's not really like, and I'm not like saying patronizing, but it's not necessarily rocket science when you invest. People make it way scarier and harder than it needs to be because there are companies and then there are other people that benefit and own these companies that every time they do business, it's been benefiting them and enriching them. And so that's not gonna stop really anytime soon, especially where things are right now. So that's the real big thing, and I think the reason I was asked to talk to you all to like really mention this concept of investing and being part owners of business, because we are the biggest consumers in the sense that we're constantly marketed towards these advertising campaigns and we give our dollars to so many different things, but we don't own those things. And it's like if we just shift our mentality from rather than spending, then putting that and building equity or ownership in other businesses, that's going to help us out. Because then why would it be a casino? Because you would have just thrown that money out on some designer shoes anyway that's not bringing you any value. But you could be buying something where you know, like a Procter & Gamble, where people have to buy toilet paper, dish soap, like all these different things. Like, does that sound like gambling? It's really not. It's just like, it's a matter of how you frame it and your outlook towards what your goals are. And the way I look at it is, yes, you want to save your money, but once you have like an emergency savings like established, everything addition to that should be working for you, because you can only work so many hours during the day, right? And it's not about how much money you make, but it's about how much money you invest. And you want to put your money to work, and you want that to work harder for you. And that's just the real benefit of being, I guess, young at this point, and just to have understanding that. Next slide. What's an emergency savings? Emergency savings is a fund that covers 6 to 12 months of your expenses. So if you don't have one, maybe an activity for you to do is just write down everything that you spend your money on a weekly basis, and then do that for a month, and then see what you spend over a month, and then multiply that by 6, and then that's how much you should probably be having a savings goal for. You could be more aggressive and multiply that monthly number by 12 and try to save up to the 12 months. But once you have that and feel like you could weather a storm, or your expectation is not that you're supporting and providing for your family right now, which is incredible. You don't have a lot of bills, you probably don't have debt. So you really have a lot of opportunity to get ahead and build habits, and to start doing stuff early on that'll benefit you later on down the life. Because I've seen it before, and And just speaking candidly, just where things are. I mean, when you think about jobs and job security, it isn't what it used to be. So you want to for sure make sure that you're in a space where you can be indispensable and where you feel like you're be able to do what you're best at. And so sometimes people aren't able to find that, and then they don't have the financial resources to support them as they make those transition, or if something happens to rest on, and they're in an awkward space. So the younger that you can start getting into these habits, it's going to serve you great. You have a great resource, this book. And then I know if you all have smartphones, definitely download the Rapunzel app. So it's in the App Store or Google Play, but it's a great tool just to learn and see how the market works.
Miles,
Yes.
can you tell us how you developed the money habit? Because I like the fact that you use the word habit. Saving and investing is a habit.
Yeah,
You want to make it like one of those things that you do every day that you don't even realize that you do. It's just part of your natural state of operating. So can you talk about the things that you did, or the
What I
things that your
did, what was
parents
forced.
taught you?
Yeah, it wasn't like I just wanted to do this. When I was your age, I wanted to do the same thing you all want to do. So every time we got money, my brother and I split it up 3 ways. So 10% of every dollar would go to charity, because you always have to give back. You should be giving back. 40% of every dollar was your savings. That ultimately became investing. And then 50% of every dollar was your spending money. That's what you had to live off of. So it was like ingrained. Every single time you got money, we had to do that. I hated it. I did not like that at all. Like, it was really helpful, and especially definitely carry after college. Like, I even got more aggressive. So like every check, I saved half of it. So just got into the habit of living off half of the check, and then that was able to help me save up for make a down payment and buy something. So it's like these habits. It's not about how much you make, because there are people that make $400,000 a year that live paycheck to paycheck. That if they lost it, they're underwater, and you don't have much right now. And so that's the benefit. So you can just get into the habit of not having, and even when you start making more money, you still stick to those principles of what you were used to living off of, and you don't just step up and buy more things to adjust to the lifestyle. Eventually you can, but just try to see how far you can go, and it'll really benefit you, definitely. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, so we went over that. We can, next one. Yeah, so back to investing. I think the biggest thing is you want to think about the future. Seriously, you want to read about a company's history, understand what they do, but really take a look at, is this stuff that's going to be needed in the future, or are they planning to adopt or adapt towards things that are developing? Like an example of a company that didn't do this, and you all may have never heard of this company, was Blockbuster. So Blockbuster was this organization, this business, where you could go and rent these things called VHS videos and DVDs and video games, and you get a week with it, and you return it, and you can buy candy and popcorn there, and it was a thing. People used to go there every week, right? There are no more Blockbusters. That concept sounds probably silly to you all. Why would you go and borrow a DVD? You go on Netflix, right? So Blockbuster it's crazy. They had the opportunity to buy Netflix, I think, in 2002 for $50 million. And at the time, $50 million to Blockbuster, that's nothing. And now, Blockbuster, I think they might be down to 2 locations, and now Netflix is this $50 billion company, right? So they weren't thinking about changing their business. They had an opportunity to, but they didn't. But one thing that I will say is, if you read these things called annual reports, which are essentially report cards for companies, they give you all the information that you need to know about a company. So never just take advice from people on social media or anyone. Just go look, do your own homework, and it's not hard. Just get an annual report, you can search it, and basically a company will show you, they have these things called financial reports, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. But essentially what you want to do is see if the numbers are growing. It's not that hard. Is revenue increasing? Are costs growing or shrinking? And that'll tell you like the viability or the overall health of a business. But also into that, you'll see like what the management is doing, what they're investing in, what they're divesting in, how much people are getting paid, all these different things. That's going to ultimately tell you how good a company is. Like that's what I was doing in middle school. That's what I still do now. It's not like you can do more difficult and challenging equations and things like that to discount stuff, but at its core you need to understand the business, what they do, and if are they making money, can they make money, because all that stuff is speculation and forecasting anyway, so it's not rocket science. But that was just an example. And then also don't invest in companies that are just trendy, because that's what I said about the taking advice from people on social media. Typically those companies don't like have a lot of breadth to them. They're just kind of like just hype companies, and those are things to watch out to. But that often happens when you do your homework. It's just like school, you know, there might be some things where you copy off people, but when investing, you should not copy off of anyone. You need to do your own homework, or if they have an idea, maybe take it, but do your own homework to understand, because it's your money. Why would you play with your money? And I think you should really treat that special. Next slide. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is stick with what you know. So what's a company that you support? Yeah. You said what? YouTube? Is that what you said, YouTube? No, what did you say?
Oh, here, let me, just wait for the mic. There you go.
Like YouTube?
YouTube,
Yeah.
okay, YouTube, that's owned by Google. Google's is a profitable business, so that's one. You can invest in there. What's the company that you support?
Safari.
Safari? Like the browser, the internet browser?
Yeah.
I think that's owned by Apple. Yeah, so Safari, when you go on the internet, that's a very profitable company. They've got a lot of cash. Any other companies that you all support? How about you all back there in that row? Yeah, you three. Yeah, you. Yeah. You like you spend money sometimes. Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
You've never spent any money? What store have you spent money at before?
Nike.
Nike, yeah, Nike. They get a lot of people's money. So I'll tell you a real cool thing about what's going on.
Nobody
Amazon.
orders anything from
Order
Amazon? Oh boy, right.
So I'll share it with something that's really interesting going on with Nike, and this is something that I've just like followed. So Nike's stock price has not been doing well over the past couple years, and part of the reason was they had this guy, the CEO, who was running it, but his background was not from within Nike. And so historically, all of Nike CEOs have like always worked at Nike. So this person's background was like at a consulting firm where basically consultants give recommendations to business, how you can be more profitable. So he was trying to do that at Nike, and that ultimately negatively impacted their revenue and their profits and ultimately their stock price. So that has not been doing so well recently, but they recently just brought in a new CEO that has some of those qualifications as some of the previous ones did. In addition to that, a thing that happened while this other person was under the reins was that we saw there's this increase in trendy running shoes. So like brands like On Runners, they were able to like capture more of the running share of the market. But what I learned is that's so marginal, and Nike has never even like actually spent that much on that campaign. So a lot of people think that they're really doing that bad, but they're not. So nonetheless, there's this opportunity to like get in now where there's a discount, but that's always happening. And the whole thing is, and what's going to be your best friend is news. And unfortunately, while there might be chaos in the world and all these different things, there are people that are making money and they're losing money in all of these situations. So it's really upsetting. But when you see the ones that like they're directly company related, or it's something that you're interested in, or there's a cause or a company that's doing something to change and make positive in the world, then those are things that you can like ultimately invest in. But you should just always be paying attention to the news and articles, because that's going to help you understand what's going on with those underlying businesses that you support. All right, any last questions? Yeah, don't be hasty. Buy what you know, don't sell. That's the biggest thing there. Next. Next. So yeah, compound interest is one of the biggest things. Can we go to that next slide after this? And what I was telling you all is like, can you go to the next slide? All right. So basically what we have here is the value, what's called compound interest. And the real key thing about investing, that is why you want to do it. It's because basically you're earning interest on top of interest. So when you save money, the idea of saving money is basically preserving money. It's that it's somewhere that you can have it safe and you know it's gonna be there and you contribute to it. But in theory, when you save money, it's not necessarily growing on its own. Typically, savings accounts, they pay these things called interest rates. So banks give you an appreciation for putting your money in their bank. And letting you keep it safe, because they basically lend your money out to other people at higher rates, and that's how they make money. That's how banks work. But investing, that's where it gets really interesting, and that's why I said once you have your safety account established for your emergency fund, your money should be going to work, right? Because there's this thing called the S&P 500, and basically it's just, we'll call it a platform, or we'll call it a list of the 500 largest companies in the world. And that list changes ever so often, but it tracks the performance and the profitability and the growth of all of these companies year over year. And so, since they've basically started tracking these groups of companies for years, on average, they earn about 10% each year. Right? That's a big number in comparison to a savings account that pays 1%. So what I mean by that is, if you were to invest in a vehicle that just represents those 500 largest companies, your money basically, even through recessions and economic downturns, on average, you're earning about 10% each year. That has been subjected to change in the future, but historically that's been the case. And so what we have behind me is the change in $10,000. If someone invested $10,000 today, what that would look like in 50 years, versus if someone invested $10,000 growing at 10% each year, not making any more contribution, what that looks like in 50 years. So you can see $10,000 in a savings account is only about $16,466. And then 10,000 in the market is 1.1 million, right? So you see the difference? So that's kind of like, you remember when I told you my example of like, I started with like $4,000. That was like by 2012, that was like about roughly the account value, maybe 6 or something. But between 2012 and 2019, as the economy is recovering, it's growing substantially. So it was growing even more than 10%. But all I was doing was in college. So I didn't need to spend that money anyway. So luckily it was there. If I didn't have this company, I wouldn't have sold any of those stocks. I would still have them. It would be great. But this is cool too. But nonetheless, the example here is just more to show you like how much that looks like. So imagine that after you have your 10,000 savings, right, and now you're building your investment, you build 10,000 there, but then you contribute $1,000 every month or annually. That number is going to get real big, but that's really what people do, and that's really how it works. That's how you build wealth. Yes, it's shifting for sure into the what assets or what different industries are benefiting. But at the end of the day, that's where, young people are just, that's your secret sauce, is because we're going to be ultimately living in you all's world, and you all are going to be the ones responsible for implementing and affecting that change. So you are the power truly is in you. It always is. That's just kind of how society has worked. So that's how you should really be thinking about things. So I think I'm about end of my time. Thank you all for listening to me today and being here on a Saturday. So thank you.